So hopefully you're here for Iterators. I'm Jake Smith. I'm a software engineer at Mastery, an API management company, co-organizer of Dallas PHP. Contact information, I'll have some at the end also. But so all the links that you'll see at the bottom of a lot of my slides, any kind of resources that are relevant to the topic, I've placed in this bit.ly bundle. So you can just write this down so you don't have to be constantly trying to write down every resource I mention or talk about. I'll give everyone just a second to get that. Almost there. And he's got it. And another link for you. This is the join in link, so any kind of feedback that you have on this talk would be much appreciated. So be sure to go and rate my talk afterwards. Go and rate all the talks you attended. You know, the feedback is very important and it only makes us better. So I usually like to have just a random wiki definition of what something is, and you know, it just has to be there. So this is actually what Wikipedia defines an iterator as: an object that enables a programmer to traverse a container. That's really all it is. A quote I got from a blog post 2010, I think it was. Fabian, the lead developer of Symfony, he had made this statement. PHP also have a lot of awesome features. At least two of them are, in my opinion, largely underused: iterators and streams. And this really stuck out to me because once I actually dove in to iterators, I realized that how powerful they really were and how underutilized they were. And realized we actually use objects that implement iterator all the time. So I have this slide up because I'm going to say the word iterator a lot today. Like so much that it's just all you're going to hear is iterator, 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 iterator. So we have the iterator drinking game. So every time I say iterator, you take a drink. 1 iterator, 2 iterator, 3 iterator, 4. So fun little drink game. So where are iterators used? So this is actually a link to the PHP source for iterators, which if you've never actually dug into the source of some of the things that you've worked on in PHP, there is so much great information and examples that can help guide you on how to use a lot of things. So I always like to kind of present this this link so people can find that. Once again, it's in the bit.ly bundle, so no rushes. So how many people have used simple XML? How many people have used PDO? How many people like raising their hands in presentations? All right. So I mean, all of these, the results are returned as an iterator. You can do a for each over a simple XML result, a PDO result. That's implementing an iterator. So this code right here, I was interested. I'm like, how many classes in PHP actually implement iterator? How prevalent is it? So I just wrote this real quick using an iterator to filter out and find how many classes actually implement traversable. And this is a list from, I think, 5.3. I haven't even updated it for 5.5. So there's even more classes applied here. So obviously, there's a good chance you've used an iterator and didn't even realize that's what you were using. So defining an iterator. So I wanted to just kind of quickly just run through some of the interfaces so you have an understanding of what these methods are that are required to actually build your own iterator. So we have an iterator right here. You have a current, key, next, rewind, and valid. So current's always going to return you the current value. Key is pretty obvious. Next moves you to the next, moves the cursor, and rewind takes you back to the beginning. And then valid is just validating, hey, are we at the end? Is this still valid? Or, oh, there's still more to go. Keep going. That's essentially what it is. And these are all the methods that you have to implement to actually create your own iterator. So one of the biggest benefits, at least to me, when using iterators is recursive iterator. How many people love recursion? Yeah, but if you screw up recursion, it gets really messy really quick. And so I think using the recursive iterators is a huge benefit and really easy. So the only two methods that you have to add for a recursive iterator are getChildren and hasChildren. Pretty obvious what they're doing. Does this element that I'm on, does it have any children? If so, get me the children. So countable. So let's say you want to use the PHP function count. Well, unless you actually implement countable, you can't do that. You would have to use a special function called iterator count. That's kind of annoying. We don't really care. We just, I want to just count this array, or I want to count this iterator. I don't want to have to check to make sure it's an iterator, then do iterator count. So if you implement countable, you can actually return what the count is for the iterator you're working with. So it's very important, at least to me, that you use countable and then seekable iterator. So this interface allows you to, send it a key and say, hey, take me to this specific element in this iterator. And I know you can't see this, but this is, I want to say, the bare basics of creating your own iterator. Now, that is a lot of methods for just doing, just creating a simple iterator, but like I said, we'll go through and you'll learn some of the easier ways to handle this. So let's go through some iterator basics, some things you're going to run into, some terms you're going to run into. So an iterator aggregate. So the best way to describe this is it's used when you need to offload the iteration to something else. So it has a method getIterator. So let's say I have this iterator I want to run over, but you saw those methods we had to create. Well, I mean, that's like making my class even larger. I don't want all that stuff there. So what you can do is you can actually have the getIterator method, and it can return an iterator, and that is what's used to run all that stuff. And you can kind of separate it out. So your iterator aggregate is a container for your iterator. So the iterator rotates as you iterate over your iterator aggregate. Oh no, there's a lot more iterators. Get ready. So just read this one. I like reading this. I know you're not supposed to read the text, but I just love it so much because there's so many iterators. Outer iterators act as a wrapper layer. Outer iterator is iterated, then internally iterates over inner iterator. Iterator. Everybody on the same page? Okay, that's what I thought. So essentially, it's a wrapper. Both the iterators are rotating essentially at the same time. I like to think of it more of like like the insides of a watch or something. They're both like rotating at the same time. Like I said, I have plenty of code examples later on, so this will make a little more sense. If I just sat up here and didn't show you any code, none of us would have a clue what we're talking about, except that we're talking about iterators. So recursive iterator. This is probably the number one thing that screws people up, I think, when they get into iterators is recursive iterator. You're like, okay, I'm going to create a recursive iterator. Problem is, recursive iterator only sets up your iterator to be recursively iterated. Yes, exactly. What? So if I actually did a for each on a recursive iterator, it wouldn't recursively iterate. All we're doing is setting it up with the getChildren and hasChildren methods. So once again, it will infinitely go there. So iterator. So just a note, if you use for each with iterator, it will auto rewind. If you're using a for or a while, you need to make sure that you actually rewind the iterator itself. That's just kind of a little side note. All right, on to recursive iterators. So this is my example data. So I have a post with a title, email. So I have my recursive array iterator. We're doing a for each over. But you see down, well, maybe some of you might not be able to see. Down here, the return from the post it just says the word array. That's not what we were expecting. So this is where we introduce the recursive iterator. The names are wonderful, aren't they? Yeah. So this is what you actually use to iterate over a recursive iterator. So I want to just briefly talk about some of these constants here. So the default is leaves only. So that's only the children will actually be outputted. The parent key will not show up in that for each. But you can set it to self first, and it'll output the parent and then all the children. Children first, output all the children, then the parent. Once again, there's an example that'll show how that's really helpful. So we do the same thing now, but we actually wrap it in the recursive iterator, and we get our title email from the post array that we had before. So now it's actually outputting what we were expecting. It's not just going to say array. And that's how, and like this could indefinitely go. You could have forever amounts of nesting, and it would hit them all. So one thing I created using a recursive iterator is I created a menu. I wanted to be able to just generate a menu anytime. So right here we have home page, registers. It's like a normal navigation you'd have on a site. So I went ahead and created my own hook recursive iterator. So there's two methods that don't really get talked about much called begin children and end children. And what these are hooks. They don't actually do anything right now, but they get run all the time. But it makes it easy for me to actually wrap things. So whenever I have like a children, I want to have a submenu. So I'm just going to output a UL, and when I'm done, I want to output a ULLI. That's just the way I set up this menu. Once again, the HTML, set however you want. So by doing this right here, I was able to just output an entire HTML menu just based off of just that array I showed. Once again, I did self first because I wanted the parent to show up in the actual menu itself, and then all the children as a sub-menu. So that's something I like to do with the recursive iterator. Something that might be a little more common for other people is I have a cache folder, and I just need to clear it all out real quick. Well, right here, we go back to that child first, because you got to delete the children first before you actually delete the directory itself. So I can have my recursive iterator going over a recursive directory iterator. So right here, I do an array map with unlinked. So I'm going to just delete all these cache files. And then we have this thing right here called iterator to array. So this is one of the most frustrating things, I think. Well, there's plenty of frustrating things, but this is one of them. So you can for each over an iterator, you can run certain functions on it, but I can't do an array map because it's an iterator, it's not an array. So you have to run iterator to array to convert it down to an array. So even though in the for each loop it's treated like an array, it's not an array. So we convert this iterator to an array, and then I'm array mapping it. So I'm saying I want you to delete every file in the directory, all the files, directory, and this can, you could have 20,000 folders deep. This is going to hit all of them and clear it out for you. So directory iterator. So this is one of the, probably, if there's anything you walk away with today, this is probably one of the things you really need to list to. So how many people, if you wanted to list out some files from a directory, do it this way? That's just the way you've done it forever. That's the way. So I did a Google search like this morning or last night. And I was like, let me just do a search for list files directory PHP. First thing that popped up, scan dir. Next thing, Stack Overflow example that I pasted right here. First two pages, I didn't find anything that even mentioned a directory iterator. So all that can be simply gone down to directory iterator in the directory. That's it. Then I can just start going, and it returns me an SPL file info. So I can actually, on that file, I have so many options, so many things I can easily grab. This one line, that's all I need to do, and I could actually get all the files for that directory. So, doesn't that seem a lot easier than having to do all that? We move from that to this. But like I said, nobody really hears about the directory iterator. So I'm here to get the word out on iterators. See, it's all just a little overwhelming because I say iterator like 50,000 times in this talk. So one note, though, when you're using a directory iterator,